Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Niki Davis with Love.Life Telehealth, and today I am super excited to welcome you to a special webinar all about heart health. And I am joined today by the lovely Dr. Suzannah Bozzone, one of the lifestyle medicine physicians who I work with at Love.Life Telehealth. So how are you today, Dr. Bozzone?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. All
So
right, so we are
excited.
gonna, I know, I'm excited too. I mean, heart health is one of those things that I feel like a lot of people are interested in. There are just so many things that maybe people don't quite understand about all the risks. I mean, so many risk factors, right? And it's our number one killer. So it is, I think it's a really important topic.
Yeah, indeed, for sure. Our number one killer, indeed, and affects everybody. And there's so much power to be had and so much great evidence in terms of lifestyle medicine and nutrition and how we can find power around this somewhat scary or perhaps very scary for some people topic.
Yeah.
So hopefully we will gain some of that power today.
I agree. And it is a scary topic because I think all of us know people who've been affected, right? I know for me, both my grandfather and my father,
Mhm.
unfortunately, had cardiovascular disease. And I don't want that to be what happens to me. So that's where I feel like I thankfully feel like I have more control over my future because I know what we're going to be presenting today, which is the role of lifestyle and how that can make such a huge difference in your overall risk. You don't have
Yes.
to follow in the footsteps of your parents and grandparents.
Yes, indeed. And I have the same history in my father and my grandfather as well. So yes, let's give more
Yeah,
power.
there
Let's
you
give
go.
more power. 100%.
All right. And we were asking people where they're watching from. Let's see, we've got Nancy Plant saying, two of the most awesome, compassionate doctors ever. Thank you both for all you're sharing with us today. Oh, thank you. All right. Let's see if we have any other people who are typing in where they're from. See, Dr. Bozzone. Okay. Oh, we've got Christy from Ohio. Awesome. That's near you, Dr. Bozzone.
Yeah, well, ish.
Kind of. I mean, closer than it is to me. I'm just
Closer than
off
you.
out west.
North Carolina. I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Ooh, Illinois. Fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm in Salt Lake City. Yeah. But actually right now I'm not. I'm in southern Utah near Zion National Park.
Wow. Mississippi. Wonderful. More from Illinois. Awesome. Nebraska. Yeah.
Ah, in
Dog
Illinois,
sitting.
but
Wonderful.
Ohio dog sitting. That's amazing.
Love it.
Nebraska. Awesome. Okay, well, wonderful. Well, I think that we have some slides that we're going to be sharing today to kind of talk
Yeah.
through some of what we want to discuss. And I wanted to mention we want this to be a little bit interactive. And so feel free to submit questions, while we're discussing this today. Whether we answer those during the slide presentation or after, we'll just kind of have to see where it makes sense for us to talk. But we want to make sure that you guys get your questions answered as best as we can, as much as we have time for. So please, please, please feel free to put those in the chat wherever you are watching from.
Yeah. And so, well, let's dig into this. And again, the goal is really to get your questions answered and find power around this somewhat scary topic. And so, more than getting through these slides, but let's talk about really why we're here and to ask yourself, what is your heart? This is my heart. These are my three kids. This was a few years ago. They're bigger now, but really to recognize that we always want to put it into the context, because we in the Western medical world have historically really said, okay, your value and your identity is all about your diagnosis code. And have you ever seen a diagnosis code that's like a purpose-driven soul? No, right? They're always something pathologic. They're always like,
Yeah.
did you have disc disease or depression or diabetes, right? And so it's the same with this heart disease, where we tend to kind of say that your value and your worth is a number, because that's so much, we're so data driven. And when we give you a ICD-10 code or a diagnosis code, just recognize that this doesn't define you. It doesn't tell you your worth. The whole reason we care about your health is really so you can live to do what you're on this planet to do. which is your heart and your true meaning and your purpose. It's about purpose-driven living, and health is important, but it's important for that end. And that recognizing why you're here and truly what is your heart is really the most important part. But as we dive into this, we want to always remember that focus is the joy of living and not the fear of dying. And so often I think that we are in a state of fear, and it's very hard to be in a state of healing and also be in a state of fear. So our goal here is to really transfer you away from the diagnosis code, away from the fear of all these numbers and these diagnoses, towards one of power, that you have the tools that you need to manage your health, but more than manage it, to really optimize, to be the person you're striving to become, to do what you are on this planet to do. So that's always, I think, the most important message you can have of any health talk, is to remember why we're truly here. And apparently this was a movie, Joy of Living, in 1938. And remember that. Focusing on that positive, before we start talking on a little bit of dismal stuff, why do we want to talk about heart disease? Well, because it's the #1 cause of death in the Western world. That's true of both men and women. And I particularly put this Go Red for heart for women emblem here, because I think a lot of women are unaware that it's the #1 killer in women. And this is really key. So that's what that red dress means. Because we think, we talk so much about breast cancer, and breast cancer is an important thing, but heart disease kills far more women than breast cancer does. And sometimes we forget that. It's the cause of 1 in 4 deaths in our country, and 1 person dies every 36 seconds from heart disease. And I use this a lot because sometimes I talk to patients about what we can do about nutrition, and they're like, yeah, but I get gas or stomach upset when I eat this much fiber. And I say, you know what? Gas never killed anybody, but heart disease every 36 seconds. So put it in the context, okay?
And by the way, the more you eat fiber, the better it gets. I mean,
yes, the gas
it's normal to have gas, by the way, but it is normal, right? You shouldn't be walking around gas-free. I'm sorry. I wish that were not the case, but it is the case.
It is the case. So go on a fart walk. That's what we're all about.
Yes.
So in 2019 is $240 billion. I'm sure it's going up every year. Our annual healthcare costs are $4.9 trillion every year, 90% of which is driven by chronic conditions. And so I like to kind of give this slide just as an overview of really, it's everywhere. This is the #1 killer of everyone in the Western world. But when you look at where it's most highly concentrated, it's in the Southeast, which is, of course, I'm right here in Tennessee, and it's very dark there. I saw some people from Mississippi. So anyway, just to recognize that there is a distribution, there's a lot of reasons why it's even more concentrated in certain areas. And we can talk more about that in the Q&A. But let's just kind of lay the groundwork and then get to some of these great questions that look like they're coming through. So just so we understand what it is, and we're focusing, there's a lot of different kinds of heart disease, but we're talking about coronary artery disease, so that we just understand what that means. This on the left is a picture of a, quote, normal heart, and on the right is a diseased looking heart. And you can see these coronary arteries that are fueling the heart muscle. So the heart is a pump, and it pumps blood, hopefully oxygenated blood, to where you need to go to get oxygen to your muscles and to your brain and everywhere you need to go to continue fighting and flighting, but also rest and digesting, all the things that you have to do. And so you want these, if you look at the blow up of this coronary artery here, you want it to be wide open, like a straw that's wide open, so that you can pass all those oxygenated red blood cells even to the end, to the very tip of that heart, to get the oxygen where it needs to go. And so when you look over here at the diseased heart on the right, it's as if somebody's pinching it like a straw on the outside, only it's on the inside. And that's really how the plaque or the atherosclerosis begins to develop, that narrows off the blood flow and the ability to get oxygen to where it needs to go, particularly when you're active or you're walking or you're under stress. And so in those moments, you may or you may not feel chest pain, but in that situation, it would be reflection of a decreased oxygen to those muscles in your heart, or that area of the heart, I should say, that needs that oxygen. And that can, but not always, cause chest pain, for example, as one of the symptoms. And we'll talk about we'll talk about some of the other symptoms that you may or may not have. So chest pain is the most classic one, and that's called angina. If you have chest pain with activity, that gets better with rest. So that's the classic angina, but again, not everyone has this. And something going back to that comment about women tend to have more atypical symptoms. So just to be conscious of that. And they're also less likely to be accurately diagnosed and more likely to be chalked up to anxiety or other symptoms. Because as you can see, looking down this list, many of the symptoms of heart disease are somewhat vague. Palpitations, right? I could have palpitations because I'm nervous or because I just had caffeine or for whatever reason, and often because I'm anxious, or it could be a symptom of having an issue. So fatigue, another vague symptom that could be anything. It could be thyroid. It could be I didn't sleep well. And shortness of breath, particularly if you have shortness of breath with activity. Sometimes we sweat or get really sweaty. So that's called the diaphoresis or the sweating that can sometimes accompany it. And certainly if the chest pain radiates to the left jaw or the left arm, those are the classic symptoms that we talk about, or a feeling of doom, which is again somewhat vague, but you might have no symptoms at all. So that's why we're really here to understand and to go deeper on the numbers you want to be aware of that could reflect an increased risk of heart disease. And again, that's really what we want to cultivate, power to recognize who's at risk, not to put you in a state of fear or paralysis, but to give you a state of power so that you can use the information you have to best manage and prevent heart disease down the road. And just to comment on, but it's in my genes, and Dr. Davis, I don't know if you hear this a lot, everybody in my family has heart disease, so I'm just waiting for my heart attack. Has that come up in your patients?
Absolutely. Well, and actually, I had a patient not too long ago who said that exact thing, and he discovered, making lifestyle changes and how that can really, decrease his risk. And what he said to me was, here I've been, because of my dad, because of my brothers, I just every day was thinking, when is it going to happen to me?
Yeah,
Just this fear and this feeling, this weight on him all the time, and feeling that there was nothing he could do, right? This was just his destiny, no matter what he did.
right.
And so once he finally realized and started doing some research, and I don't remember exactly how he got about it, maybe he watched Forks Over Knives or something, but then he thought, oh, this doesn't have to be that way. And it was just this amazing release
Yeah.
of just like, wow, I can actually control my outcome here. I don't have to have what happened to my brothers and what happened to my dad happen to me. So
Right.
yes, absolutely, it's something. And I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there that just aren't aware, right? They really do believe that genetically they're waiting for the day that it
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
even
really,
if, I think it's amazing to think about, because the mentality of healing is something that we don't talk about enough, I don't think, in the medical world. But I saw somebody comment on anxiety and how significant that is. But also, even if you've had a heart attack or a stent or something like that, just to recognize that sometimes these events, while we'd never ask for them, but they kind of weigh us down like this. And if something is weighing you down, whether it's the fear of the impending genetic issue that you perceive, or whether it's that you've had the event itself, if you get it off of your shoulders and get distance from it and look at it with distance between you and that eventuality, and you recognize, actually, I'm safe in this moment. And if I perceive this scary event as something that is weighing me down, and it's very hard to heal from there. But if I get distance from it, it might actually be the best thing that ever happened to you, because it's this eventuality that is actually saying, I should really look at what the data says about lifestyle, where it can find power. And then you begin, and I've seen this so many times, where people get a heart attack or a scare, and it was that made them start for the first time in their life truly living to the person that they were striving to become. And so it's
yeah,
not always
absolutely.
a bad thing. And to remember that if we get distance from it and see it from a different angle, it might just be quite beautiful indeed, even if you've had a history of this problem, or if you have a strong fear, to recognize that if you didn't have that, you might not be looking for the power that is right there at your fingertips.
Yeah, yeah. And it looks like we have a question. So Rochelle Wilder says, my plant-based cardiologist told me that anxiety, oh, this is the one you were talking about, told me that anxiety is like smoking to my heart, and to get it under control, or I should have a stent with my blockage. So that's interesting. I don't know if this is a little bit of trying to talk you into a procedure, and trying to, or saying, hey, you need to really get this stress under control, or I'm going to require that you go get a procedure done. Yeah, that's interesting.
That is interesting. I don't know all the details behind that either, but there is something. So I'm going to talk about stent placement actually,
Yeah.
and what the data says. So let's look at that in just a minute, because again, current evidence suggests that your genes are not your destiny. Now this is different because it sounds like you might have some blockage in there. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But to recognize that we are here, all lifestyle medicine certified, to really recognize that it's not about blame for the condition that you might have, but it's about empowering you to redirect your health destiny, or to find power along your journey, to know that, yes, sometimes we need to prescribe medications or do procedures, and that's not a quote failure, but we want to make sure we're optimizing and maximizing, and also recognizing that you have amazing power to heal. And certainly mental well-being is a part of that, because if we don't feel safe, then it will just further exacerbate that fight and flight, and it's harder to support that, the place of healing. I need to tell my adrenal glands I'm safe, so that from there, then I can start that healing process and conversation. But if I'm always like, then it will be harder. And so I don't know if he was talking about, anyway, but we'll talk a little bit about stents as well.
Yeah.
So isn't heart disease just normal aging? And I think this is really just an important just background for the information that we recognize now with our best data. This is just one example of that. There's tons of studies, but over 80% of coronary artery disease, the kind of heart disease we're talking about, is lifestyle driven. And so I love this study, Healthy Living is the Best Revenge. It's got the coolest name, the Epic Potsdam study. But this is the goal, is that we want to redefine what we have previously considered normal aging, right? What is normal to you? And I know certainly that heart disease, in fact, is not normal. And one thing that we know is that high blood pressure, a risk factor for heart disease, is actually not normal signs of aging, that our blood pressure physiologically goes down with age, naturally speaking, but our Western lifestyle, that is inflammatory diet, not moving, stressing, not sleeping enough, all the things that has unfortunately become the norm in our Western lifestyle, is what cultivates the blood pressure, and us perceiving that it's just normal to get your blood pressure medicine when you turn 45 or whatever. So that our goal is to empower you with this information, and to take that study a little bit deeper. Those 4 things: not smoking, exercising 3.5 hours a week, eating a quote healthy diet, which in this study was defined as one that is rich in whole foods, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and low in meat and processed foods, and having a body mass index that's not in the obese range, which is less than 30, resulted in an 81% prevention of heart attacks, our number one killer. So this is why we're here. This is why we are so excited at Love.Life, and why we really want to tell the world this, and really empower people to know that it is not about your genes. Yes, that can lower your threshold. So there is some genetic component, and that applies to some of the lab results we get. I don't understand why my cholesterol is still high and blah, blah, blah. But to recognize that the road to heart disease begins early on. And if we can start looking at this and nudging healthy behaviors earlier, I mean, and this just kind of speaks to, if there's one population that has a worse diet than our American adults, it's our American children. So the recognition that now we're screening kids for high cholesterol, and that's really rooted in lifestyle significantly, and that it's really something that progresses. So as we speak to, and we'll talk about coronary artery scores, I think I might have seen a question pop by on that. As we speak to this, and if you have some plaque laid down, maybe from your past life, and now you're plant-based, and now you're just trying, we'll talk about what that means, but just to recognize that this is a progression. It's not that you wake up at age 52 suddenly with heart disease. And so in light of that, we have a lot of power. Would you add anything to that, Dr. Davis?
No, that's absolutely true. And unfortunately, we're starting to see even the beginnings of plaque formation, fatty streaks in the large artery, the aorta that runs through our body, like almost through our entire chest, where we're seeing in children starting to see fatty streaks. So this is something that it builds up over time. And so there's never a time to not start improving your lifestyle. Just because you say, well, boy, I'm in my 60s now, I've been eating a poor diet my entire life, I'm not exercising, you can still benefit absolutely any time that you decide that you want to improve your lifestyle. You'll still get benefit no matter how long you've been living this way. And we've
Yeah.
seen that in studies that have been done in people who have had heart attacks and strokes in the past. And once they change to a healthier lifestyle, they have no further incidences or much less frequent incidences of heart disease.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see this question, 71-year-old, whole food plant-based for 16 years, no chronic diseases, no scripts. And I assume that means your blood pressure is normal. You exercise daily, no alcohol, healthy, but cholesterol's high at 213 total cholesterol, and your LDL, or quote bad cholesterol, we'll talk more about what that means, is at 130. Do I need a statin? And so what we always look at is the overall risk, and that's what we're going to talk about today when we talk through kind of the labs that we want to look at and the package, in terms of assessing risk. And so looking at someone that's overall low risk, and again, and also as we get older, so if this is primary prevention, meaning preventing your first heart attack, versus secondary prevention, in other words, I've already had a heart attack and I want to prefer, we have better data on secondary prevention because the clock really starts watching you closely. You've already had a heart attack. You've already been in the system. So we have just better quality data on using, statins, let's say, or other medications to to prevent your second heart attack. But in terms of primary prevention, preventing the first one, which sounds like that's what this person is describing. And particularly as we get older, over 70, over 75, when we start looking at statins, the data in the older population is less clear. And so what I would do in that situation, it wouldn't answer that question like yes or no right off the bat from that, but looking and further assessing the whole history, maybe looking at a coronary artery score, and we'll talk about what that is if you're not familiar with that, and fleshing that out, because again, we don't treat everybody the same when it might seem like that, but you have to look at the overall risk, and then you have to look at where you find your power. And how do you tolerate this? Does this provide you more power, or does it feel like something that is not helping you? And so I don't know, would you add anything to that? So what I would do is further risk stratify, meaning put just a little bit more details in the information to look at the likelihood of this particular person going on. You've done really well so far, and it sounds like you're doing really a whole lot to prevent further plaque laydown if there might be some plaque there. And so that's fantastic. So obviously keep up that lifestyle, but in terms of that question, I would want more information myself.
Yeah, and I agree. I think further risk stratify for sure. And then, the real beauty of meeting with one of the lifestyle medicine doctors like us is that we have the time where we can really discuss this in detail with you. So where your previous experience with your physician, your primary care doctor, or maybe a cardiologist is that you're kind of in and out pretty quickly, and they might just see the number and say, hey, time to start a statin. I'm going to go ahead and send that to your pharmacy. And you don't really get to discuss much about it. Whereas we have the time where we can really not only help you figure out, okay, what lab tests do we want to order? Do we want to do any imaging tests to figure out your overall risk? But then we can really talk about, okay, so for you specifically, what are the benefits that we might get from taking that medication? And what are the possible side effects that you might get? Where really are you in the benefit versus risk of this medication? Because not, like you said, secondary prevention, you might get more benefit than if it's just primary prevention. But it also depends on how old you are, what your sex is, do you have diabetes, what your numbers are, blood pressure numbers, what your cholesterol numbers are. There's so many things that can go into this. It's not an easy question to answer. And that's where it's really nice that with one of us, we have the 30, 60 minutes to really go through these kinds of questions because people have them. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's really difficult with kind of the current way that we see our doctors to really be able to sit down and have those nice, long conversations, because not everyone wants to just say, okay, yes, I'll just do exactly what you're recommending to me and I'll start taking this pill. They want to know the information behind it and whether or not it really is worth it for them.
Yeah. And it's a partnership, and I think that historic, we were kind of trained in a dictatorship. Like, you will
I
do this,
know.
but we have to recognize, well, what's important to you, and really, and inform you so that you can make an informed decision for your own health and say, well, this is the risk, this is the likelihood, this is the benefit for me, the number needed to treat. That is, like, what is the benefit for me at my risk level if I were to take this medication versus not take this medication? And then you decide if you're where the benefit and the risk is for you personally, and kind of go from there.
Yep. Okay, and
Uh,
then we have another question that we can go through. I had no symptoms and took the Clearly test and was shocked to see my blockages, 80% in the LAD, that's, the widowmaker, and 74 in the right coronary artery. Do you think the Clearly test will be the gold standard?
hmm. um,
So I feel like, so the Clearly test, I want to say, is where they're looking for soft plaque. I don't know much about
oh, this is a
the
coronary
data.
CT. Okay. Okay. Yeah. 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 So coronary CT angiography.
Okay.
So I usually so I guess that's the same as a CTA, but I just wasn't
Yeah,
familiar with the
like the
Clearly.
CAC score. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think I don't know about that. I'm not in certainly no one's asking me to make any guidelines or anything in terms of creating the gold standard. But I think it is interesting to use different data points and to see what we find here. And yeah, it can be really surprising because some people just lay down plaque more than other people, and so when we get this information, we can do a lot more in terms of how aggressive we should be. And that's really the question we're asking, is that for some people, a high cholesterol, they just have never laid down plaque. They say that they're 71 years old, their cholesterol has been a little bit high, but they just have never laid it down, and we don't really know till we look. And that's kind
right.
of, this is just another way to look. And there's never a perfect test. Like the coronary artery calcium score, which I think a lot of people are familiar with now. It's great to some respect. It'll tell you if you've laid down plaque, but it's really showing you not new, more dangerous plaque. It's not showing you the soft plaque. It's showing you the old. It's kind of like the acne scars of, I have laid down plaque. But it does give us information in that we're like, well, you are a person that lays down plaque. And so we would
Right.
tend to treat you more aggressively, as opposed to somebody that might have high riding cholesterol all the time, and then and they get a coronary score and they're 0, and that doesn't rule out all risk, because again, we can't see that softer plaque. And so with a CTA, which is this angiography, CT angiography, we can see more, and that might be better. I don't know in terms about gold standard. There's a lot about like cost and all those things. And I just don't know that information. But I think getting more information can be helpful, as long as it doesn't put you into fear paralysis.
Absolutely. Yep, I agree.
Yeah, good question. So, just going through all of this information and say, well, if this was such a big deal, why didn't my doctor tell me about it? And I think it's nice to kind of go through the history of what we were trained, at least what I was trained. I'm sure you were probably the same, Dr. Davis. But in the past, how did we always manage heart attack? And really, it's like we're looking at that one blockage, or we were trained to look at that one blockage, just like we're trained to cut you up into these little compartments and say, you have a heart problem, so you go to cardiologist, and you have a gut problem, so you go to gastroenterologist. And we're not looking at the whole picture. And so historically, we were trained to look at this one area of blockage on your heart, and either they would say, you have a blockage, so you can't get oxygen down to where it needs to go, so we're going to get another vessel and bypass it, just like you do on the highway, bypass around where the congestion and the traffic is so much. You create another vessel to get that oxygen down to where it needs to go. Or we say, we're going to go at that one area and we're going to blow it up so that it widens up, so we can reopen that by putting a stent in. And so that's this picture of a stent. You place that in there, you blow up the balloon, and then it says, oh, look, I can get oxygenated blood through this nice vessel now. Isn't that cool? And so, but that, while that can be important, and it can still be important in the management of heart disease, by looking only at that area and not recognizing that if we have a blockage in one vessel, we certainly have all of the roots to create blockages anywhere throughout the body. That's a relatively new thing. And so this was a pretty landmark study published in 2020. And in the past, we were like, it seems that if we just do lifestyle management, and that it often includes statins or other medications, that we actually have better outcomes than doing this interventional stuff, But they didn't really have a lot of data in terms of like really severe or moderate to severe heart disease, which means more narrowing. So this study was a big deal because over 5,000 people had stable, that's a big word, stable. And I'll tell you what, like who might still need a stent or a CABG or that coronary bypass versus, is whether or not you're stable or not. So these people were all stable, but they had pretty severe narrowing of their vessels. And that's what this means. And what they found was that stents and surgery were no better than medication and lifestyle changes. And so then they were like, and still I see patients that are getting stents and surgeries and they were stable. And so there's still procedures being done, because now one thing to know is that you often get quicker symptom relief. In other words, like with chest pain or things like that. So if it depends on, again, it's a risk benefit, but for outcomes, there was not a significant difference as long as they're stable. Now, if their vital signs are unstable and whatever, these procedures are still warranted. So I'm not saying that none of these should ever be done, but certainly fewer than were historically done. So that's where we came from in terms of the training that we had in the background. But just to remember that if there's blockage in one area, there's almost certainly blockage or a potential to be blockage in other areas. And the great news is that if we cultivate a lifestyle that optimizes blood flow, it's going to benefit so much more than, quote, just our heart, just our number one killer, right? So whatever areas that you want to bring attention to, whether it's hormone balance or gut health or whatever, you need blood flow to do it. And the two underlying roots of pretty much all of our chronic conditions are blood flow and inflammation, right? So what do we want to do? We want to create a lifestyle that reduces inflammation and improves blood flow, because there's 100,000 miles of blood vessels throughout an adult's body. So the power that we hold to create a lifestyle that optimizes blood flow is so huge. And this is the earth. You're like, what? Yes, this is the earth from 100,000 miles away. So just to get the context of, taken from the crew of Apollo 10, that the earth looks like that, that's how many blood vessels you could affect if you lived a lifestyle that could optimize your health, and how many areas, your brain, your mood, your energy, your every organ system, your skin, like you name it, it's going to benefit from a lifestyle that improves blood flow and reduces inflammation, not only your heart. So this is the goal of really addressing the roots of the problem rather than just treating the symptoms and treating the numbers. We really want to get to the roots. And if we look at what are those roots, these are our kind of modifiable risk factors. And this is what we, of course, want to look at. And this is what we look at when we look at our patients. Some of the many things that we look at, but we all know smoking, not moving, stressing, but also these particular things: high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high sugar, so pre-diabetes, insulin resistance, diabetes, etc. High waist circumference, so that kind of reflects your visceral fat, the fat in and around the organs. That's why looking at body composition or looking at the waist circumference rather than just the number on the scale is so much more valuable. And excess alcohol, all really are modifiable risk factors. That means things that we can change to provide us power to help improve our blood flow and reduce our inflammation. And those all in yellow are highly affected by what we put in our mouth. So we have the opportunity to feed disease or fight it depending on what we eat. But of course, it's not just that. It's, are we moving? Are we stressing? Why we do what we do, and so on. And so it looks like there is another question here. Can you speak to calcium supplementation and coronary calcification? If food first is the preferred strategy, what is your opinion on low-dose food-based calcium supplements to shore up? So I really don't generally suggest calcium supplementation unless there is an issue with your calcium, because generally of your parathyroid or something. I really try to get calcium-rich foods from whole foods. and do that. Your body knows how to use food. It knows how to get rid of what it doesn't need and use what it needs and get sufficient calcium. Yes, calcium is important, and it can be, if you're not eating a balanced whole food plant-based diet, a nutrient of concern. So you want to make sure you're getting enough, but I don't generally recommend calcium supplementation. Dr. Davis, do you have any?
I don't either. Yeah, I don't either. Unless there's a really good reason for why you absolutely need to have it. And like you said, usually parathyroid. But in general, no, should not just be taking calcium supplements just because you think that you need to. Yeah, get it through your diet.
Yeah, and you know, calcium, dark leafy greens. Where do the cows get their calcium? You know, look at your tofu and
yeah,
calcium.
Tofu.
That's where I would go. And you can always do a calcium calculator. You can go to like MD calculator or something.
MD Calc. Yeah.
MD Calc, that's what, yeah. And just put in like a typical day and see how much calcium you're getting and try to boost your calcium rich plant sources. We have lists of these kind of things we can give to patients if it's of concern. But certainly, I don't think the data is great to suggest calcium supplements. But I do know there's still a lot of doctors that do they're just in the habit of just saying calcium and vitamin D, calcium and vitamin D. I do recommend vitamin D supplementation, but not calcium.
Yeah. Okay, then we have another question. Isn't there evidence of higher risk of heart disease and stroke among people who take calcium supplementation? So there is a concern with taking extra calcium in the diet because, you know, you are, one of the issues with atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries, that plaque buildup is that it's calcified, right? And so the more exogenous calcium that you're taking in above and beyond what you really need, it can increase your risk of having that calcified plaque. Yeah. So you definitely do not want to overdo it with calcium supplementation.
Yeah. For sure. So and also I'm just going to give a brief summary of, you know, just if you're looking for more information, and knowing the history of where this came from, you know, the Lifestyle Heart Trial published by Dr. Dean Ornish in 1998 in JAMA, you know, in a nutshell, I like saying nutshell, but losing your lifestyle, what did he do? He did these 4 things: move more, eat well, stress less, love more. What does that mean? He said, move more, exercise 30 minutes a day. And that's kind of coherent with our guidelines, 30 minutes at least 5 times a week, 150 minutes per week of moderate. That means I can talk but not sing exercise. And that's what he focused on in this study. Whole food plant-based nutrition was the nutrition he encouraged. Stressing less, he used meditation in that study, and group support, that is connecting, you know, recognizing that we are currently in a loneliness epidemic based on the Surgeon General's recent report that endorsing loneliness. And this kind of goes back to that statement about anxiety and your mental health, that endorsing loneliness is thought to be as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And if you think about that, you know, the most dangerous thing that could have ever happened to us was being extricated from our tribe. You know, you'd be certain lunch for a lion, right? And your adrenal glands really mount that stress response. And again, what do we want to do? We want to cultivate that sensation of I am safe. Maybe even take it another level. Maybe I am grateful. And from that place, we can really begin to cultivate healing. And so with all of those things, connecting and community, and these are addressing 4 of the main pillars of lifestyle medicine in this trial. And he showed a 91% reduction in chest pain with activity. And again, remembering that, you know, if you're having chest pain with activity, you're less likely to engage in those things that matter most to you, to walk with your grandkid, to walk with your wife, or to move, or to go travel, or do the things that give you passion and meaning in your life. And that's why we're all here. So that was pretty impressive. But what was really amazing is that he continued to show more benefit the longer you did it. And, you know, try one medication that does that. There isn't one. Right? The longer that you're on this and you grow that sense of reward and celebration of what you have accomplished, and you want to do it more, and ideally you unite around it. You don't feel isolated in your tribe. And that's what we really try to cultivate, is it's a community. And it's really hard to eat healthy when you're the only one doing it, or trying to live a life that's health optimizing when everyone's making fun of you. You know, and so this is, and I tell you, you know, and it's so fun when we get on our calls with Love.Life and everybody's so like fired up about health and plants and like mushroom recipes. And it's really uniting, and it can be fun. And that's what I think a lot of people and a lot of doctors, they might be vaguely aware of some of the data, but they just don't think anyone would do it. But I have to say that what you gain is so much better than what you give up. And particularly when you find a community to do it with, a doctor that supports you in that. And that's what we're here to do, is to create a community and a provider that can not only give you the evidence, but also can support you in that, so that you feel not lonely or isolated in your journey. So any comments on that?
No, fantastic. You're
awesome.
Amazing.
Awesome. So this, let me just warn you that this next slide is really disgusting and I really want to change it. But what drives most of these risk factors? Again, we don't have to talk about too much about unhealthy diet. Most of you know what that is, but it's the standard American diet. It's full of highly processed food. It looks a little bit like this. I hate this slide. I'm so sorry.
Oh God, gross.
Shades of beige, right? What do we want? We want the colors of the rainbow on a bed of greens with a side of beans. And don't forget the whole grains and seeds and nuts. So that's really what we want to replace this with, because the current nutrition that drives not only impaired blood flow, but also inflammation is really where the standard American diet is. It's almost 60% highly processed foods. It's been stripped of fiber and nutrients and all the glorious, wonderful things for your body to feel nourished. And that's what we focus so much on, but it's not all we focus on, but the importance of nutrition and shifting away from those animal products that are really house the saturated fat that drives our cholesterol up. Yes, they house cholesterol, but it's really the saturated fat that's predominant in animal foods and in processed foods, as well as palm oils and things like that. So just to recognize that saturated food is not only from animal products, but also from palm oils and from coconut oils and things like that. And we try to really minimize those and get you more of the whole good quality, fiber-rich, nutrient-rich foods. And this really addresses most of our heart disease risk factors, and among other things. So really important to recognize that. So I want to recognize the power that we have through plant-based nutrition. And I'm sure that most of the people on this call know these quotes. There are two kinds of cardiologists, vegans and those who haven't read the data. Dr. Kim Williams, this is really not about vegans, in other words, focusing on what you're not eating, but focusing on whole plant-rich foods. It's focusing on what you are eating that nourishes you. And this study by Kaliova showed plant-based diets reduced heart disease risk by as much as 40%. But of course, it's not just one thing. It's not just kale all the time, right? That'd be great. Like that's good, but that doesn't get you all you need. There are many pathways why whole food plant-based nutrition and lifestyle medicine really help to prevent heart disease. And so these are just a few of those. And I want to go into the testing that we offer and that we recommend to start looking at not just one thing. It's not just your cholesterol. Yeah, that's important. And that's a big piece of it. But just like that question that came in, we want to look at your cholesterol in the context of inflammation. So we look at your inflammatory markers. We want to look at what your gut is doing, because your microbiome, those trillions of organisms that line your entire intestinal tract, give the environment where your genes can either switch on or off disease. That epigenetics, that amazing ability to modulate or shift gene expression. Even if you have everyone in your family having heart disease, this is why we have so much power, because with lifestyle, and a lifestyle that fuels you with joy and purpose, as well as good blood flow and lower inflammation, you can actually redirect your health destiny and change gene expression. So not only that, you can lower your blood pressure, which of course we know is a risk, and you can improve your sugar control. Diabetes I didn't put on here, but insulin resistance also a major risk for more development of that atherosclerotic plaque or heart disease. So where can you begin? Well, this is where we really encourage a personalized conversation. We can get a lot of information that's geared towards the general public, but I know most of the people on this call are probably not the general public, and having personalized guided information is so valuable. So that's what we do at Love.Life, is to really support you there. And so maybe Dr. Davis, would you mind talking us through this heart health assessment that we're doing? And
yeah, and we've had this for a while now, but we did want to, because we're talking about heart health today, we wanted to just let you know that we do offer an assessment where you have a 60-minute appointment with a physician. You get a slew of labs that are all cardiac markers, and this includes not just the basics like what you were mentioning. Just a lipid panel is what you'll normally get when you do an annual lab test with your primary doctor, but we're also checking like the C-reactive protein, inflammation. We're checking the LP little a or lipoprotein little a, that is an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease. We're checking apolipoprotein B. So there are lots of things that we're checking to help us get a more comprehensive view of your overall risk, so that we can have that conversation of, what do we tweak with your lifestyle? Is a medication warranted in your case? It just gives us more information so we can make a better decision on your health and what to do. So it's great because you not only get that first 60 minutes and that lab set, but you also get a 30-minute appointment after so that you can discuss your lab results with your physician. And think about that 60 minutes that you're going to get. Initially, you get to go through all of your health history. So that's where you bring in any tests that you've had done previously. Have you had a coronary artery calcium score done? What does that look like? What does your family history look like? Have you had any heart issues in the past? And we can really take that with these lab tests that we're going to do and then really come up with a really good plan for those 30 minutes that you get at the end. And so it is actually a really great opportunity to just get a really great comprehensive review of your cardiovascular health and then come up with a plan for what to do after that. So if you go to our website, you'll see that there is, and that's just telehealth.love.life. If you go there, there will be a button that just says assessments so that you can go through. And we have different assessments available, not just the cardiac assessment or the heart health assessment, but we do have other assessments as well. So definitely something to look into if you're interested in looking at your cardiovascular health.
Yeah, fantastic. And also just to kind of that we truly do understand what is cholesterol, and why do we care? I think the easiest way that I like to explain it is that, it's not really about the cholesterol itself. It's about where it is in your body. And so this is really cholesterol metabolism. And the reason we've always called LDL or bad cholesterol is because it's like a taxi cab that's taking it out into the system where we don't want it, where it has the potential to cause atherosclerosis. And why we've historically called HDL the good cholesterol is because it's driving it back home to the liver and getting it out of the system or the bloodstream, so that it's not going to be available to cause atherosclerosis as much. And now HDL and the understanding of HDL has changed quite a bit, because it's not about the number or the quantity so much as it is about how useful your taxi cab is. In other words, if you had a bunch of high HDL, but they're all broken down in the periphery, they're not going to get your cholesterol home. So because I still hear doctors telling patients, oh, don't worry about it, your HDL is nice and high, so you don't have to worry about your LDL. Well, that's really not true anymore, because we don't check so much for the quality of your HDL or how well your taxi works. We only check for the number. And so just so that you know that information is very old and no longer accurate information. And so we look really at the LDL, and now even more, we look at the ApoB, which is relatively new. I think there's still doctors out there that aren't very familiar with ApoB, but it's even more exact. Usually, it's about the same as the LDL, but for some people it's different. And what does it mean? It's truly even a more specific understanding of what cholesterol is out and available to be oxidized or to drive inflammation and to drive that atherosclerosis. And it's even more accurate than your LDL. LDL is a pretty good judge, but if there's a discrepancy, in other words, if your LDL and your ApoB are significantly different, then we defer to the ApoB as really a better, more telling indicator of what's the opportunity for atherosclerosis. Would you add anything to that explanation?
No, I think that's good. And I think, the way that I describe it to people is ApoB is actually a protein that surrounds those cholesterol particles like LDL, but it's not just around LDL, it's around other particles that can also become plaque, like chylomicrons, VLDL. So by checking just LDL, you're not getting the complete picture. I mean, like you said, it does give us a pretty good idea, but ApoB is great in that it is the only cholesterol particle it's not surrounding is HDL. So it really truly is all of those particles that can become plaque. And I do think it seems to be a better indicator for your possible plaque risk.
Yeah. Yeah. And Dr. Davis mentioned LP little a. This is a one-time test currently. It's not something that we trend or that we continue following, but just making sure we've checked it one time. Because if someone has a high LP little a, then that would reflect an underlying increased genetic risk. It's not a slam dunk. It's not the only risk factor. Like you could still have another reason why you have a lower threshold for heart disease, but it's one that we would tend to put you in the higher risk category if it's high. So it's nice to know because we historically haven't checked that. And then I mentioned a coronary calcium score might be something that we suggest if you're kind of on the borderline and we just want to flesh out if you've laid down plaque before. So nice to know about those tests. And then maybe we'll take this question. Can you please comment on the safety of vitamin D supplements for heart health? It seems there's some controversy among plant-based doctors as vitamin D may increase calcium in the bloodstream. Well, I think my understanding is that this is kind of a U-shaped curve, right? Because deficiency is often linked with chronic conditions. It's often linked with more atherosclerosis. But if you have way too much vitamin D, and I've seen patients that, because vitamin D is like all the rage. And then with COVID, people were like, oh, I'm going to solve all the pandemic with my vitamin D. It's like, it's about balance, right? We need enough vitamin D. And so, if you get excess vitamin D, that might not be beneficial. In fact, certainly it's a fat soluble vitamin. While it's unusual, I've seen a few cases where people were just taking so much vitamin D that it can be liver toxic in that situation. I've only seen that a few times, and people were taking like 50,000 every day, like crazy high amounts. And so I think this is like vitamin D is important. And certainly we don't have all the nuances worked out, but I think that with a reasonable amount of vitamin D not going overboard, my understanding, I don't believe there's a risk. I think that the risk might be having to do with calcium shifts that occur with either end of the spectrum, too low or too high. Do you know? I don't know a ton about that, but
No, I agree. I agree with that, and I think vitamin D is one of those things that. Obviously, it's best if your body makes it using sunshine exposure on the skin. So, but you have to be careful, right? You don't want to also be burning and increasing your risk of skin cancer. You want to get just enough vitamin D. But I have seen, and I think it's just, you go to a grocery store, you go to, say, Costco, and they're selling these big jugs of vitamin D supplements that come in really high doses. And it's usually in higher doses than what we really need. I mean, most people do okay with 600 IU a day, maybe 1,000 IU a day, but people are taking 5,000 with really not even knowing what their level is.
Yeah.
And so it is important to discuss that, I think, with your doctor and not just taking it to take it, but to really know how much you need and what your level is, because you can't overdo it by taking way too much.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. We have 4 more questions. Okay. Let's see.
We've got about 8 more
minutes.
Coconut
oil as a salad dressing. Some say it's too. Oh, sorry, I missed that one. Well, hold on. I see one over here. Thoughts on coconut oil as a salad dressing? Some say it's too high in saturated fat. Yeah, I would shift away from coconut oil. It's not my favorite. My favorite salad dressing actually is half rice vinegar, half orange juice, and miso with like some raw garlic and herbs in there if you want to, or if you're lazy, just do that. And it's so delicious, and you don't even need any oils in it at all. And it's so wonderful with kale and that vitamin C helps kind of bring out the iron and synergizes with your dark leafy greens, and it's just beautiful and wonderful. So I would tend to if you're dying for oil, then I would use a good quality olive oil, but I don't really think you need it when you kind of start playing with your good whole fats. Put some raw nuts on there, put some seeds, put some or if you want avocado, whatever, and then I would just do a dressing that's predominantly vinegar based generally.
Yeah, well, and especially with you talking earlier about how really increases in cholesterol are what we see in people who are taking on too much saturated fat. And unfortunately, coconut, how delicious it is over 90% saturated fat. So it's just one of those plant foods that happens to be really high in something that can increase cholesterol. So if you're worried about heart health, I would not recommend coconut oil.
Absolutely. 100%. Heart valve regurgitation. So this is kind of dependent on the severity of it, but certainly anything that causes regurg, which means that like rather than having all the fluid pumping forward, you've got a little bit pumping backwards, and the severity can make a big difference because it can affect pressures and backlogging of fluid, et cetera. So what you always want to do is optimize whatever you have in terms of your heart function. So again, blood flow, reducing inflammation, watching your blood pressure, gradually working with increased exercise tolerance, et cetera. And again, like a little regurg is very common when we do an echo or I always almost see like a little regurg in one of the valves. But if it's severe, that might require more monitoring or more significant intervention, but always optimizing your capability to heal, which really addresses all of these things in lifestyle medicine so that your heart is not strained any more than it has to be based on that regurg that you might have. Would you add anything to that, Dr. Davis?
No, I think, again, we're kind of going back to looking at the whole picture and making sure that you're doing everything you can to improve not only the overall health of all of your vessels that run through your entire body, but, thinking about it's not just about not having the plaque lay down, but also, by eating a healthy, low inflammation diet, plant-based diet, you're going to help with just the pliability of those vessels as well. All of that goes, all of that is related to, all of those things with the heart, including regurgitation. And sometimes that can be just from, even plaque buildup on your, the leaflets in your heart. And so in my mind, we don't know enough to really make any kind of judgments on what should be done, what can be done. But in general, I think that making sure that you're eating a very low fat, whole food, plant-based diet can only be beneficial for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see. Here's a question. Dr. Nathan Bryan says the first thing to check for cardio health is vascular function. Two tests that do that are Endopat and Vindus. Do you recommend these tests? Where are they available? Good question. So these are non-invasive medical devices that check endothelial function, and that's like something I think you put on your finger for 5 minutes, and it kind of looks at the sensors and looking for signs of endothelial dysfunction. And this is something that I think, in terms of where we have the most evidence is kind of what we're more able to give recommendations on. And I think this is certainly not something that I have seen a ton of. I've seen some reports of this. I know there's practitioners that really love these, but just in terms of extensive data that really goes into this better quality evidence, I am not aware of a ton of that existing. So these are not something, and also because I don't know where you can get these. I've seen them. I've seen patients that come in with these results, and I've seen the results of them. And I think they're interesting, but I certainly am no expert on this. And because of the availability that it's not just a typically commonly ordered thing. I just don't know how much vast evidence we have right now to give great advice on it, or again, I don't know if you have anything more to add to that.
No, I agree. That's the same thing. I think we need more data to really know whether or not those tests are worth getting or not. Because you have to remember, whenever you go to get a test, even like one that we're mentioning on this slide, the coronary artery calcium score, you have to be aware of what would you do if your coronary artery calcium score is really high, and what will you do if it's 0? And is that something that you really want to know? Because it's not necessarily something that a lot of providers are recommending that everyone go and get, right? It can give you information, but you need to know what you're going to do with that information to make sure that it is worth getting that test done.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you've already had a heart attack, you've already had a stent, then don't waste your time getting a coronary score, right? Because so looking at the person, and just like this question from Instagram, I would like to find out if I have any blockages in my vessels. No current heart problems known. My doctor said the only way to find out is to do a stress test with nuclear injection. How safe is that? Thank you. Yeah. So again, like I would look at your overall risk first. and look at all those risk factors that we talked about, and then decide, again, you could get a stress test, and those are generally safe, but I wouldn't put them on everyone. Like I would do some first tests first, and maybe do a coronary score or a CTA first, just to see, like, am I just throwing a test to throw a test at you, or are you of a higher risk? I mean, I would generally put one of those tests slightly higher, with some exceptions, depending on, like, if you're going in for a surgery and you really you need to be effectively risk stratified, or then there might be some caveats where doing, there's reasons why we would do that test, but I would personalize that.
Right. Yep, I agree. Okay. All right. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. I feel like you and I could just talk about this forever.
Absolutely.
There's so much to talk about. In fact, we should probably do another one of these and just kind of go into more details, more depth. But I want to thank you, Dr. Bozzone, so much for joining me today. This has been really amazing, and you've just got so much expertise, and it's just really great to be able to share this information with people.
Well, so fun. Same to you. And yeah, this has been so great. And we really appreciate you guys, everybody that has logged in today. And yes, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for everyone who joined us today, and especially those who decided to submit questions. Really appreciate it. And if you have not had the pleasure of working with one of our doctors yet, maybe now is the time. If you are suffering from chronic lifestyle related conditions, maybe you just want a doctor who is on your side and supportive of your lifestyle. Maybe you're on a bunch of medications and you are sick of it. Maybe you just don't feel your best. Please come visit us at telehealth.love.life to make an appointment. We have 5 amazing doctors who cover all 50 states and DC and international. So you can go to our website at telehealth.love.life, or you can even give us a call at 888-420-7284. We would absolutely love to talk to you. Until next time, I'm Dr. Niki Davis with Love.Life Telehealth.